Hey everybody, this is me, Undead Viking. I want to talk to you about this game. It is called Vivarium. Vivarium, as you can see by these different critters that you can see on here, including humans, is a game of species that are trying to control these wildlands on the board. This is a board that you create by using these cool hexagon critters right here, and you can play with up to 5 people. When you play with 5 people, the game does get really huge and big, which is awesome. I like games that have a large territory, if you will, a large amount of table space. But it is kind of unique in the fact that it is a deck building game, but it is a deck building game that you know, it isn't a situation where you're like, you know, like it isn't Dominion, basically, because of the fact that there's a board to it. I mean, I know there's been other deck building games with boards, if you will, but this is a deck building game where you are moving your animals around the board. And I shouldn't say all animals, because, well, I guess technically humans are animals, but you know, the human is a species in this game. You are moving your species, there you go, around the board. And you're trying to control different territories as told to you by the game. The game will provide different events and telling you that, you know, if you control these territories, they'll be worth points and things like that. And so you will be warring over these territories, and especially in the middle, there's this place, the Oasis, that's very important, with the other players, and basically trying to establish dominance over everyone else and by achieving points. Now, the cool thing about this is that, and I'll explain this a little bit, is that you will be warring with the other animals. And the thing is that when you defeat them, not only do you, you know, basically kick their critters off the board, but you get points for doing that, and you actually take the points from the people that you defeat. So this isn't a game where if somebody's like got a good build or whatever, and you're like watching their points just, you know, stack up because they're able to like get their animals in certain spots or whatever. You do have the ability to directly affect them and take those points back and actually add it to your stockpile if you want to just go ahead and have a direct attack approach. So I really enjoyed that. I really liked the fact that it did kind of open up that possibility in the game as well. So let me show you how the game is played, and then we'll come back here and I'll talk a little bit more about why I have enjoyed playing Vivarium. Alright, I've set up a 2-player game of Vivarium. This game does play up to 5. You are going to add more of these map tiles if you play with more players. You can see there's like little starting spots right there and there. Those are only present for the number of players that you have available. These discs are 2-sided, so you know, as far as the setup goes, the maps are going to be extremely varied every single time that you play. The center of the map will always be this particular tile because this has the Oasis in the middle. The Oasis is kind of like the spot that you want to control. It's going to be worth points if you control it at the beginning of your turn, which points are called fitness in this game. And also, due to events and things like that, things are going to happen in and around the Oasis as the game continues. Now, each player gets one of these cool little player boards. They will like list off their abilities of the animal that you have, and also all the powers and what have you. Here, I'll show you exactly how this works. You have these sections up here to represent the 4 different seasons of the game. Occasionally you'll have to put tokens on those, like when you're going to be progeniting more of your animal, so your species out there, so in this case bears. So like here you have, you may only use this delay embryo, you may only use this ability in summer, so like in summer you do it. You pay 6 energy to mature a bear to be deployed in spring. So what happens is, if you do that, what happens is like you take one of these, one of your little bear tokens here, like so, and since you deploy it in spring, you go ahead and you would put the token right there. And that would allow you then, when spring comes, you could take this and then place it out onto the board so you can move around with your bears and control more territory. Bears are kind of a neat little race, or I shouldn't say race, but species, due to the fact that they can only ever have 2 of the species in one spot in one territory at one time. Now, you might be looking at these and see all these little tiny hexes like so. Each hex technically isn't a territory unless you only have one hex that represents it, like these in here. This is a territory. This is a territory. So these 2 bears, when they're moving around, if you move around together, you know, if they were like in here, like so, they would be controlling that territory. And when species end up in the same spot, they will have battles and they'll combat each other. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in how the game is played. But please, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, so each hex is a spot. No, it's the type of terrain is what matters and what determines you know, what you have, and like as far as like, because there's a lot of things in the game that are going to say if you control X amount of this, you'll get a bonus of this. So if it says like you control 2 grasslands, you'd look and see the grasslands on the game, like this is a grasslands and that's a grasslands. And if you controlled both of those, that would be controlling 2 grasslands, not 2 small hexes. So, this is a deck building game, so each player will begin with 10 cards. Your starting 10 cards will be basic instinct cards, which would just, basic instinct, you get +1 energy when you play these, and then they also have these fear cards, which do nothing for you. They're kind of just, they stagnate up your deck, and they make things difficult for you to, take your turn. This is a very standard draw 5 cards, play your 5 cards on your turn, deck building game, and then you're going to strengthen your deck by purchasing these cards that are over here in this tableau. These cards over here will have, they will have like these cost. That's just the cost to buy it. It isn't a cost to play it. After you buy the card and it is in your hand, you just get to play it and it works. And then they have a type of card, designated by the color, and then they have a power. So like gain +1 energy for each population card you play before this card. So that's a type of card, a population card. And then this down here is the energy you get for playing the card on your turn. You always get the energy. However, the way it works is that you only get to use the power if you actually match up the type of card. So this is, these are ingenuity cards, and so like this costs 5 and this costs 3, but if you had these in your hand and you played them in order. So if you played Scout and then Rally, you'd get the +3 energy that's down here for using them, but you wouldn't get the Scout power. You wouldn't get you may reveal the top card of your deck and overcome or draw it. Or you wouldn't get that. You would get the second one. Draw 2 cards. Each opponent may draw 1 card. So so if you wanted to mix and match and play them in order, remember you always get the energy, but you don't get the follow-up ability. So if you have cards, like when you drew your 5 cards and say you had a shield card, but you didn't have any more of this icon, like green, you'd still get the energy, but you wouldn't be able to use the power on the card until you actually built it up. And so that's kind of like, what I kind of like about this game is that the deck building, in a way, kind of dumbs it down a little bit for me. Not that I'm not, I can figure out how these games work eventually, but this is one of those things where I introduced this to my daughter. And because of the fact that it's kind of color-coded and you have the ability to see the cards that kind of coincide and match up really well, it can be a little bit easier for somebody getting into this type of game, this genre of game. But anyway, so I wanted to talk about a couple other things that you're going to see on this player board. You're going to see these little icons here. These are the costs that it costs in energy to move into these types of terrain for this species, the bears. So you always get 1 movement point. So you can always just move into a territory. Remember, once again, we're not talking about 1 hex. We're talking about moving into a territory. So like moving here would be a territory. Not 1 hex each time. But to move into specific types of territory, it costs extra energy, and that is listed on this particular there. And so you can see, like, it doesn't cost them anything for their home territory or the oasis, but everything else for bears will cost extra energy to move into those. Just to go over the other things, so roaming at the end of your turn, if you control a territory with 2 bears in it, you may move one of those bears to an unoccupied adjacent territory for free as extra movement. So you have a little extra power there. Hibernation. At the start of your turn, if it is summer, you may discard 0 to 2 cards. The first card you discard reduces the cost to reproduce this turn by 2 energy. The second card you discard reduces the cost by 1 energy. So notice how, like, at the very beginning, you know, we're in summer right away at the beginning of the game. So that helps you, keep, so you'd have an extra bear towards the end. And there are other ways, other cards that you'll be able to get that will help you, create more of your species and more of your units out on the board. But this is the basic way to do it. And the thing is that you need to save your energy for those moments because of the fact that it's always a good idea to, if you can plan ahead, like I believe the wolves go through their process, the variable litter size, you can activate it in winter. So, like, they could save up the energy until winter before they'd use it, and then they'd be able to go ahead and have more wolves when they're born. And then finally, every race has like a limitation for their species, something that they have to overcome to be able to be competitive. And says you can have a maximum of 2 bears in one territory. If a bear must be deployed in a territory that already has 2 bears, immediately move it to an adjacent unoccupied territory. And that's what I already talked about earlier. Combat, obviously, the more animals you have, the more units you have in combat, the better. So, it's just the bears have that limitation with it. So I'm just going to kind of show you the other species. Okay, there are humans in the game because the idea is that it's basically every species is trying to establish themselves. They have anacondas. Here we have gorillas, and then hawks, tigers, and crocodiles. So that you have several different options available to you, which actually obviously will increase the longevity of the game because of each race will have its own way of, best route to winning, if you will. I should mention these dials. You're probably wondering what them. I haven't even mentioned them yet. So basically, you have a dial on the bottom that will keep track of your energy as you increase it up to a maximum of 20. And then you have the top dial is your fitness, and you will go ahead and you start off with 0, but every time, I should say, you gain 2 fitness if you control the oasis at the beginning of your turn. You just 2 fitness. Each one of these event cards, as you turn them over, like here, exhaustion is. So it says, for this season, cards in the lineup cost 1 more energy to buy. Ooh, that sucks. But control the most rivers and forests at the end of the year. If there is a tie, this objective stays in play. But if you do it, you get 4 fitness for doing it. So it gives you a goal for what you have. If you successfully beat somebody in combat, you get to take 2 fitness from them, like a 4-point swing. So if they have it, if they don't have it to give, then you don't get anything for that. And every time you buy a card from the tableau over here, you get a point of fitness every single time. So you are in a situation where, buying cards and strengthening your deck. You want to strengthen your deck anyway, but every time you buy one, you get a point. So, it's in your best interest to go ahead and do that. But of course, you want to have a plan. You don't want to glut up your deck with a bunch of cards that aren't really helpful for you. So, play the game, and I'm not going to go too far into this because I'm going on a little bit of a limb that most of you have played a deck builder at some point in your life. But if you haven't, what happens with this particular one is that you're going to draw your 5 cards, and so you draw your 5 cards. In this case, we have the 3 instinct cards, and we have 2 fear cards, and then so now you're going to play these cards on your turn to, like, first thing you do is you're going to play them to, if you had extra cards that had extra abilities, you enact those abilities when you play them. But obviously in your very first turn in your game, what you're going to end up doing is you have a situation where you have these fear cards. Those aren't any good, but you have these 3. Now, I could play those for like an instinct, like the energy bonus that they have. And obviously I probably should, but I should probably, because of the fact that bears have this ability that says, you know, it's like if I discard 0 to 2 cards as you start a turn if it's summer, if I discard 2, it reduces the cost to reproduce by 2 energy. The second one reduces it by 1. So it costs 6 right now, right? But what I can do, luckily, is I can discard these 2, and that reduces my cost to reproduce by 3 total. And I'm going to gain 3 energy by playing these 3. And so what I'm going to do then is you go ahead and move your little dial over to 3, like so. And then we would have a situation where now, luckily, I would be able to, on my turn, actually, because like the first part of your turn, what you do is that whole process, what I just did. You go through the process of showing your cards. If you have certain powers that you enact, you go ahead and process those. But then after all is said and done, you have your energy, and now you can go ahead and spend your energy on whatever you want. You can use them to buy cards over here. You can use them to move on the board. And like in this situation, you could use them to reproduce. And so what you would do then is with the bears is that you just go ahead. I'm going to use those 2 discards to reduce my cost by 3. I have 3 energy. I spend that 3 energy to go down to 0. And now, because I can go ahead and place this bear on that location right there to show that I'm going to deploy them in spring. And so that would be my entire turn. Not the most exciting of turns, but because of the fact that normally you get that 1 free movement, but unfortunately, because it costs extra energy for bears to move into another location, they can't move in this situation because I don't have any extra energy to do that. But I'm liking that choice if I was the bear player, because having more animals, more units out on the board means you can control more territory, and it means that you can get out there and go ahead and do more. Now we're opening up the barn door a little bit for the wolf player, because of the fact that now all they have to do is control. Actually, I apologize. No, this is at the end of the year. So, this end of the year, that each turn obviously is going to have, the different phases of the year. So we start off with summer, and then we go to autumn, then we go to winter, then we go to spring, and then we go to the end. Now, I'm going to actually mention this before I forget this. So at the beginning of each particular season, you will turn these cards over, like you can, and go ahead and process those for the different seasons, the different events. But it should be noted that, in the case of, because you're playing this in one, going through the different players, you have like the first player, and they have this little first player token right there, and they're going to remain the first player, but this token will go ahead and go to the next person on the clockwise. And all that is, even though like the bear person will go, and then the wolf person will go, and then the bear person will go, the bear would then hand this to this player over here, because now we move it into autumn. But the thing is that until it is this player's turn, you aren't going to turn this card over. The player order doesn't change up, but the actual the reveal of the event will actually change. And that obviously, with a 2-player, it's not nearly as dynamic. But with a 5-player game, you have a situation where, as the game progresses, you'll be waiting, longer, to actually see what the event is, see the process. And so I found that to be a kind of a neat little spin on the whole turn order mechanism, because of the fact that knowing what the point is, as far as what you will need to do to gain the points that are on the bottom of these. Obviously, knowing it as early as possible helps you out, because you kind of flying a little bit blind, as far as where you're going to be placing your animals and what your goal is and what have you. And so if you're in a situation where you don't know that, you like, obviously then if it's later on in the turn order, that person will have that advantage of being able to act upon the event, and instead of the other players will have to kind of react to it, if you will. So other stuff is pretty self-explanatory. If you purchase cards off the board, you're going to just obviously replace them from the top of the deck and place those onto the empty spaces. And as they get purchased, they just removed and so forth. You place purchased cards into your discard of your hand to show that it is done. And so, I mean, it's, if you played, like I said, if you've played a deck building game before, the whole process of building your deck should be very apparent and very simple and straightforward for you. Now, the one last thing I'm going to talk to you about before I go into my conclusion is combat. So combat occurs anytime you have a situation where you have two different species in the exact same spot. Now, when that happens, you need to go ahead and you turn over your tokens. It might be kind of tough. I'll show you this. So you can kind of see they go into this like kind of little sleep mode. Basically, what that means is that they aren't allowed to move anymore. It's because they're going to have to duke it out. And so, for just, I'm going to say that we have 4 wolves in that location. Wolves run in packs, and that's actually one of their special abilities, that they can have these packs of 6. And actually, one of the cool things with wolves, while I'm talking about them, and the wolves are one of my kind of favorite things to play in this game, they have these different tokens here, and they have 3 different colors of them. This is an alpha wolf. You have the ability as, and other species have cool little abilities too, but I'm not going to go over each one. I invite you to go ahead and check out the game page and check out the Kickstarter page. You can take a look at that stuff. But you have a situation where Rise of an Alpha. You may pay 3 energy to replace one of your wolves with an alpha wolf token. You may place this alpha wolf in an adjacent territory to create a new pack. Now, why would you want to make an alpha? Well, if you look at it, you have this thing where once per turn you may move an alpha wolves a distance of 2 territories. You pay energy for both territories, and you pay 2 energy, and you move all the wolves in the pack to do that. That's pretty cool. Also, it's like you may, for the litter size, is that you pay 5 energy to mature 2 wolves to be deployed in spring. When you deploy a wolf, if you place it in a territory with their alpha, you instantly deploy another wolf into their territory. So basically, creating these alpha wolves is like making, like, not only are you like, creating something that helps you move about the board quicker, but also helps you get more wolves onto the board as well. And so, but one thing is that wolves are different packs, and so you have, like I said, you have wolves of different colors. So you have, for example, you have wolves that, like kind of gray wolves, and you have white wolves. They can't share the same spot. They're very territorial, even with their own species, so you can't combine those to help you with combat. So anyway, all that being said, combat is pretty straightforward. All species are going to have these little combat cards, and basically it says, depending on how many they have, you have these 2 abilities. You have, one is called pressure, and one is called persistence. Pressure, just think of that as your attack value. Persistence, think of that as your defensive value. So when you have these combats, what's going to happen is that like you have these special abilities, and like whoever is the aggressor is allowed to go ahead and say whether or not they're going to use their special ability, and then the defender follows. So if like the bears here are outnumbered, so like if the bears were the aggressor, if you're outnumbered in battle, your opponent loses pressure equal to the amount of animals you're outnumbered by. So you say, I'm going to use that ability. He's outnumbered by 2, so normally the pressure for wolves would be 4, would be 10, would be 12, but because we're down by 2, like we're going to have to lower that down by 2, so there's 10. But wolves can discard a card from their hand to increase the pressure by the amount of wolves in battle. So the wolf can say, well, fine, I'm going to discard a card, and I have 4 wolves in battle, so I'm going to go ahead and increase that my 10 back up to a 14. And now it's just a matter of going ahead and comparing the situation. And so what we have is the bears have a pressure of 12, and so they are going to go ahead and apply that to the persistence of the wolves, which would be 12 to their 16. So it isn't enough to take them all out, but wolves have 4 each, so the wolves would lose 3 wolves in this particular battle. The wolves would have a pressure of 14, and the bears have a persistence of 16. So they wouldn't, once again, be able to take out all of the bears, but they lose 1 bear, and so they go down to so you lose 2, like so, and you lose 1, like so, and then these are returned to the player's stockpiles. Now, it should be mentioned that at the beginning of the combat, and I forgot I'd mentioned this, I apologize, the person that has the highest pressure is labeled as the fight player, and the person with the lower of pressure is considered to be the flight player. Now, if they're equal, the person that signaled the attack will then go ahead and be considered to be the fight, and the other one is the flight. So we had a situation here where the aggression for the the fight power for bears was 12, and the wolves were 14, remember? So the wolves were the fight, and the bears were the flight. And so now, after all is said and done, we have a situation where we still have animals on board. And so now we have to determine who's going to be left. And that is where the fight or flight matters. Because of the fact that the bears are considered to be flight, they have lost the battle, and they now will have to retreat into a territory of their choice. So they would say, oh, we're going to go over here to these we're going to head over and we're going to hide in these forests over here. But the wolves would win the battle, and then they would take 2 fitness from the bears' total fitness, if possible, to exchange those points. And it is not a fight to the finish. You know, if you're able to knock the people out completely, then, you know, great. But it is not something where you continue fighting over and over again to determine who wins. You just fight that one round and to do that. So there you go. That's how the combat works. You know, obviously there's going to be differences and changes. It won't always be that static, if you will, because of the fact that there's going to be different cards and different effects and everything as the game progresses. But I just wanted to basically show you the bare bones of the fight mechanism. So that's that. The game will continue for 4 years. Basically, you're gonna until you've revealed all of those event cards. As soon as all the event cards are done and you've gone through 4 years, whoever has the most fitness points, basically victory points, will win the game. You know, it's like, I really like this. I mean, usually I'm a little tentative when somebody approaches me with a new deck building game, but like I said, I liked like kind of the introductory level as far as putting your deck together. I liked the theme of it. I mean, just basically because I mean this is kind of, I don't want to say it's dominant species because it isn't dominant species, but I mean it's that same kind of idea behind it, and I really like that idea of the game. I found this game to be not only challenging, but also just, you know, it's a very attractive looking game, it's a very fun looking game, and like I said, it was kind of a really neat way to introduce my daughter to the kind of deck building world. Not that she really needed much advice, she's a big Pokemon player, but you know, she really liked this one. I enjoyed playing this one with her. So let me talk more about that in my conclusion, which I will do right now. Hey, thank you very much for sitting through the gameplay portion of the video. I hope you have a pretty good idea of how to play Vivarium at this point. Now, there's some things I didn't actually get to. I mean, just because there are, you know, a lot of different nuances and things about the game that I didn't touch on. I think, you know, energy is kept from turn to turn. You don't ever lose it. You know, so you have a situation where, you know, it is beneficial to stockpile it. I know I touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that you, too many games out there, like basically, especially with deck builders, it's like when you achieve your gold or your buys or whatever it is that you get from your cards, you don't get that longevity process of like being able to bank it. And so, you know, that kind of flies a little bit in the face of what people are used to as far as that is concerned. So, I mean, I just, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like, I think that sometimes people skip over the gameplay portion, or they might not catch that. But that's something to keep in mind, you know, when you're playing the game. I can't remember the name of the game right now, and I'm sure somebody will pop up in the comments or what have you, or tell me or whatever. But I really touched on the fact that, like, the different cards or whatever, like when you're playing, you know, your cards that you purchase, like color coding them is important. And I should also have mentioned that no matter how many cards you have in your hand, you can play as many as you want. There's no cost to play the cards. The only cost is buying the card to put it into your deck. So if you have abilities to draw more cards and you know, you have 8-9 cards in your hand, you could play all of them if you want to, but you don't have to. Remember, like, you don't have to, you know. So it's just, but that's the option. But and you know, you aren't stuck in a situation where like you can only play one color and get those abilities. So like, for example, you know, if you had, you know, these 4 cards that you wanted to play, you had, you know, 2 greens and you had 2 purples, you could get the ability of the second card of each of these colors. If you had 6 cards and you had 3 different colors, you know, you get the second ability of each one of those cards. It isn't singled out like that. Plus, there's cool things as far as the events that I didn't really get to show you. There's one that actually creates like an antelope. There's like an antelope token. Yeah, here it is. There's a little antelope token that starts bouncing around the board, and the first person that captures it and, you know, kills it, obviously, gets bonus points by doing so. There's a den, basically, like a safe den that gets placed on the board, that if, like, you're the first person to claim that, you know, you get bonus points. Things like that, where, like, the board actually does gain abilities and things that are on there that enhance the game and just the immersion value of it as well. So, as I said, I played this with my daughter a great deal. You know, like she plays Pokemon and she's pretty good at it. But, you know, she's kind of wired into that game, you know, if you can understand. I mean, even though her brain kind of figures out, you know, it's like, oh, well, these cards work well with this card and this card works well with that card. She doesn't see it as building a deck. I mean, she just researches or watches videos and then kind of copies what other people do, which is fine. It's a great way to learn the game, and it's a great way to play the game as well. But this was a game that there wasn't like a tutorial for, so I kind of just explained how the different cards attach together and how she had to get multiple cards of certain colors to be able to use the abilities. Now, that was something that was very apparent to me, but that kind of put the groundwork, if you will, in her mind for, you know, this type of game. And like I said, she really started enjoying it. She likes playing the tigers, obviously, because she's like a girl and likes cats, I guess. But, you know, but she was able to, like, find different cards that actually extended the certain, or like helped out like the different powers of the abilities that the cats had. And so it was kind of neat that, like, I'm not going to say this is like deck building 101, but in some ways it really was for her, and I really appreciated that about the design and how it was able to be introduced to her. Now, that being said, I have played this in, like, I mean, I played this game more, it's a 2-player game with her than anything else, but I was able to play, you know, bigger 4-player and 5-player games with lots of people, and I have to admit, I probably enjoy that more than playing it with my daughter. Not because it wasn't fun playing the game with her. I really, really enjoyed doing it. But having the big giant board, having all the different animals running around the board and fighting with each other and going to war and, you know, all these different things really made the game kind of, you know, for lack of a better term come alive, if you will. I mean, the theme of the game really got brought out by that, like the dominance, the different species, the things like that, and you know, and I think that's what really made me enjoy this game more than anything, more than the mechanics, more than like the look of it. I mean, I like those, but I love the art. I love the way the game is presented. I think the game is just rock solid, you know, mechanism wise. But when the actual, like, the theme of the game, I think, is what really provoked an evocative response from me, and I found it to be highly enjoyable. Usually when I play a deck builder game, I just eventually, like, the theme and everything else just kind of fades away, and I'm just staring at you know, this card lets me do this card lets me do this card increases that, and it becomes like a mathematical equation for me. And so, and that's still fun on a certain level, but, you know, I'm more of a thematic person. I enjoy the theme of a game and tying it in with what I'm doing. And so when I actually started feeling that theme and feeling that I was creating a deck that was like more of an aggression deck, if you will, or a deck that was more about you know, regeneration, you know, like reproduction for my family, for my species, things like that, I really started enjoying the game a lot more. And I think if you're looking for like a thematic deck building experience, I think you might want to check this one out, because I think you'd enjoy it a great deal. So there you go. If you have any questions about Vivarium, I'd be happy to answer those to the best of my ability. Thank you as always for taking the time to watch this video. And until next time, I'm the Undead Viking, and I'm telling you to have yourself one heck of an awesome day. All right, bye-bye.